back to my X-Men series. For those of you who are new here, I'm going through each of the X-Men movies and reviewing them one by one. This is coinciding with both the series' 20th anniversary and the release of the final film in the franchise, The New Mutants, which is out now, but I currently can't see it because theaters by me are still closed. Let me know what you think of the X-Men movies in the comments below, and make sure to give this a thumbs up if you like these reviews. It helps me out immensely. I already reviewed the first film, 2000's X-Men, and I'll leave a link to that in the description in case you missed it. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with my reviews of the rest of the series. But now, let's talk about the second film in the franchise, X2. This takes place at an undisclosed period of time after the first movie, and focuses on the aftermath of an attack on the White House by the mutant Nightcrawler, played by Alan Cumming. A military scientist named William Stryker, played by Brian Cox, gets approval to investigate the X-Men, which leads to the abduction of several mutants, including Xavier and Cyclops, once again played by Stewart and James Marsden respectively. And now the remaining X-Men must ally with their nemesis Magneto, once again played by Ian McKellen, to save their friends. For the longest time, this was arguably the most popular entry in the franchise. Critically, it received just about the same amount of praise as the first film, maybe slightly more, but it pulled in nearly double what the first film made at the box office, and this was huge with on-demand platforms. This was on all the time. I forget the amount of times I saw this when I was younger because it was all over TV. I almost got sick of it at one point. But seeing it now, to this day, it still holds up. I'd say of all the movies in the franchise, the transition from the first to the second was the smoothest, with a lot of the same creative team coming back, including screenwriter David Hayter, who co-wrote the film with horror filmmaker Michael Dougherty. Which makes sense. X-Men was a huge breakthrough for the superhero genre, it was widely popular, so of course Fox wanted lightning to strike twice. The film takes that serious tone from the first movie and runs with it again, and with Dougherty on board to co-write, it definitely leans into that horror vibe a little more this time around. Some scenes to this day are a little bone-chilling. The abduction scene early on in Xavier's mansion is one that particularly comes to mind. All of Stryker's men suited up, lurking in the shadows, were just some really eerie images. Or even some of the ways in which the mutants go on the attack. Even though the special effects are noticeably dated looking at them now, they're still good, and the ways in which they show some of the mutants use lethal force with their powers is slightly uncomfortable in a few scenes. I felt that way even when I first saw this and thought it was maybe because I was still young at the time when it was first released, but seeing it now, I'm like, no, this is genuinely eerie at times. Good advantage this has to the first film is that there aren't as many new characters to introduce this time around. We only have 5 major new characters between heroes and villains to deal with, and everyone else is a returning character from the first movie. This is definitely great, as the first X-Men had to introduce us to over 10 characters who were all supposed to play a substantial role. And it was an hour and 40-minute long movie, and I'd say about less than half of those characters were fully fleshed out. This time we already know who all the returning players are, and the movie's able to expand upon their character development, most notably Jean Grey, played by Famke Janssen, as this lays the groundwork for her role as Dark Phoenix. And it still has enough time to let us get to know the newer characters, such as Nightcrawler and Pyro, played by Aaron Stanford. The dynamic among all the X-Men is just a lot better here. I thought everyone played off each other well in the first movie, but this time around, since everyone's built up a relationship with one another in between the two movies, the dynamic's a lot more relaxed. They all have a very friendly, strong rapport. You immediately feel that when Wolverine, once again played by the great Hugh Jackman, comes back to Xavier's mansion after having been away for some time, and everyone who he barely knew in the first movie treats him like they're best of friends now. I really enjoyed the bond these characters built. Which leads me to a criticism I have of this actually. The full title of this is X2 X-Men United, and with a movie title like that, I wouldn't call them very united. Not to say that they need to spend every waking moment together, but after establishing such a great dynamic among all the X-Men within the first few minutes, it spends a little more than half the movie with them all apart. Once the infiltration of the mansion happens, they're all forced to go their separate ways for a while. Wolverine, Rogue, Iceman, and Pyro are by themselves, Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, and Storm are on their own, Xavier and Cyclops were abducted, while Magneto and Mystique are also by themselves. And I didn't have so much of a problem with that. Like I said, I'm not expecting the X-Men to be all joined at the hip for 2 hours, especially with Magneto and Mystique. My issue is mainly with the fact that once they regroup and get the Strikers, they split up again. And it's not just for a few minutes. They split up for a good chunk of the second half in addition to the first half. We only get a handful of instances where there was this team dynamic and they were all together. And it wouldn't be a big deal, but I think having everyone split up, then regroup only to split up again, it drags things out a little longer than it should. I think that 2-hour runtime is definitely felt here and there. It was almost the opposite experience of the first film. The first movie, being shorter and having a lot going on, was always moving and didn't allow us too many moments to breathe, and only a few of the X-Men were allowed major character development. This time around, they leaned more into giving each character their own individual time to shine, which at first was good, but they overextended it by them splitting up again later on. This didn't ruin the movie for me though. It's still very enjoyable. The action scenes are once again very exciting and well done, especially a few scenes where Pyro gets to show off his powers. But it's Mystique, played by Rebecca Romijn, who once again has some of the best fights. The choreography and staging of her fights are by far the smoothest, and she definitely gets more to do here than she did in the last movie. We even get a little more from her character-wise. Not a lot, but a few lines of dialogue at some points that actually go a long way, whereas the first movie she was just another person working for Magneto. And it once again highlights a big theme of X-Men from the comics, which is discrimination and what happens when you give power to discrimination. That's what makes Stryker such a great villain. He's someone with a clear disdain for the mutants, and he preys upon the politicians' fears, already on edge from the last movie, that the mutants are a threat. And it's that fear that allows him the power to go in and just start straight up kidnapping mutants. This took the themes from the first movie and really ran with it to show how fear-mongering can lead to something truly out of control. And Brian Cox does an excellent job as Stryker, by the way. The way he delivers his lines with such obvious contempt without going too over the top about it, it makes him a guy you just truly enjoy hating. And they did a good job incorporating him into Wolverine's storyline without it being forced or feeling like too much. It was one of the most compelling arcs in the film. And all the performances were great, actually. Once again, the shining stars include Hugh Jackman, Patrick Stewart, and Ian McKellen. Patrick Stewart gets a little less to do here than the first film, just because he's isolated for the most part, but we do get one cool instance at the beginning when he's telling Pyro off for abusing his powers, and because he's usually such a warm character, this is the first time we really see him show off that he's also someone you would not want to mess with, so that was great. Jackman once again leans into how cool of a character Wolverine is, his fight scenes are awesome, and he again has some of the funnier moments in the film. Even though this is a more serious movie with horror vibes, it still shows how to ease tension from time to time, and that's best expressed through Jackman. And McKellen as well, actually. Since he's forced into an allyship with the X-Men, he addresses them with such sarcasm, and it was actually pretty funny at times. And McKellen's got a lot of charm, and it was nice to see a different side of him than what we saw in the last movie. All the other returning players were great. James Marsden, Halle Berry, Famke Janssen, all did solid jobs. There's a nice subplot with Rogue now dating Iceman, played by Shawn Ashmore, and they're trying to develop a relationship so that Rogue doesn't drain all the life from Iceman. It's not as heavily explored as Rogue's story in the first film, but it was one of the nicer subplots, and both Paquin and Ashmore were great. But of all the new cast members, Alan Cumming was the best, and Nightcrawler was one of the most interesting characters from the main films. Unfortunately, this is the only time in the series he appears as the character. He had to put on a lot of uncomfortable prosthetics, and his roles would have been so minimal in future films that they felt it wasn't worth all the trouble. It's a shame though, because he does a great job. Overall, this is a very worthy follow-up to X-Men and one of the better superhero sequels out there. Even though it's the most highly regarded of the original movies, I think the first movie's still stronger due to some of the pacing issues this has, but it's still very enjoyable. It builds upon the themes from the first movie, the action's exciting, the new characters are great, the effects were chilling, and all the performances were solid. After so many years, this still holds up. X2 gets an 8 out of 10. Up next, X-Men The Last Stand, and that's gonna be interesting. I actually haven't seen that one in a while, so I'll leave it at that. But I'll have that review out within the next few days, as well as more 2020 reviews coming soon. So let me know, did you see X2 or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like it more than the first X-Men? Did you like it less? And do you want to see anyone from these original movies come back for the MCU, or an entirely new cast? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you next time.